Welcome back to Mr. Midnight. Tonight we're heading to Alaska's smallest and most remote towns with 7 most disturbing true Alaskan small-town horror stories. These scary stories come from real people, school bus drivers, fishermen, nurses, and construction workers who saw things in these tiny villages that they'll never forget. Each story is from Alaska's forgotten places, where help can be hours or even days away, where the cold can kill you, and where terrible secrets hide behind closed doors. These stories come from official reports, witness statements, and personal accounts that show what really happens in America's most isolated communities. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Mr. Midnight for daily true horror stories about real people facing real terror. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our next frightening tale. Now let's visit Alaska's loneliest towns, where everybody knows everybody, but nobody will believe what you saw, and where the closest help might be too far away to save you. My name is Janet Cooper, and I've been driving school buses for 22 years. I started in Anchorage right after my divorce, needed steady work with good benefits. Got my commercial license, passed all the background checks, learned every safety rule in the book. I've driven through blizzards, dealt with rowdy teenagers, even had a kid have a seizure on my bus once. I thought I'd seen everything that could happen on a school route. But what happened in March 2020 in Wainwright, Alaska changed everything I thought I knew about protecting children. This tiny village of 550 people sits on the Arctic Ocean, so remote that supplies only come in by plane or barge. I took the job because they were desperate for a driver, and the pay was double what I made in Anchorage. The isolation didn't bother me. I needed a fresh start anyway. What I found in Wainwright wasn't just isolation. It was a place where evil could hide behind family traditions and community silence, where being an outsider trying to help could get you killed. Wainwright sits on the edge of nowhere, surrounded by frozen tundra that stretches to the horizon. The school serves about 60 kids from kindergarten through high school. My route covered 12 miles, picking up Inupiat children from scattered houses and bringing them to the single school building in the center of town. The job seemed simple enough. My bus was a 2018 Thomas-built diesel engine designed for Arctic conditions, block heater plugged in every night to keep the engine from freezing solid. Radio system connected me to the school dispatch and the village police officer. GPS tracker so they always knew where I was. Emergency kit with flares, blankets, and 3 days of food in case I got stranded. The route took about 45 minutes each way. I'd start at the Akinga house on the north end, work my way through the scattered homes, then circle back to drop everyone at school. Most mornings it was 30 below, so the kids bundled up in parkas and mukluks, barely visible under all the layers. Sarah Akinga was always my first pickup. 8 years old, missing her 2 front teeth, with the biggest smile you'd ever see. She lived with her father, uncle, and grandparents in a small house that needed paint and new windows. Every morning at 7:15, she'd be waiting by the road with her backpack, breath making clouds in the cold air. The village operated on relationships that went back generations. Everyone was related to everyone else somehow. The school principal, Robert Akinga, was Sarah's uncle. The village police officer, Thomas Akinga Sr., was her grandfather. The mayor was a cousin. If you weren't born there, you were always an outsider. I should have realized sooner that being an outsider would become dangerous. It started the second week of March. Sarah climbed onto the bus like always, but something was different. She moved carefully, like everything hurt. When she sat down, I caught a glimpse of her left arm through the gap in her coat sleeve. Dark purple bruises, finger-shaped marks. "Sarah, honey, what happened to your arm?" I asked, keeping my voice gentle. She pulled her sleeve down quick. I fell on the ice. But I'd seen enough accidents in 22 years to know the difference between a fall and finger marks. Those bruises were from someone grabbing her hard enough to leave marks for days. The next morning, she had a black eye, fresh one, purple and swollen. This time she said she walked into a door. "In the dark," she added. Like that would make it more believable. I called the school when I got back from the route. Talked to Principal Akinga directly. "I'm concerned about Sarah," I told him. "She's got some injuries that don't look accidental." There was a long pause. Janet, these kids play rough. It's different up here than down south. They're tough. Mr. Akinga, I know what abuse looks like. Someone is hurting that little girl. I'll look into it, he said, but his tone told me he wouldn't. That afternoon, I stopped by the village police station. It was just one room attached to the community center, with Officer Thomas Akinga Sr. sitting behind a metal desk. I need to report suspected child abuse, I said. He looked up from his paperwork. Sarah's grandfather had the same dark eyes, but his were cold as the Arctic Ocean. What's this about? Your granddaughter Sarah has bruises and a black eye. Someone's hurting her. He leaned back in his chair. That's family business, Janet. You've been here, 2 weeks? You don't understand how things work. I understand that an 8-year-old shouldn't have finger marks on her arms. Kids get bruises, always have. My advice is to mind your own business and drive your bus. But I couldn't mind my own business. Not when I saw Sarah flinch every time another kid bumped into her. Not when she started falling asleep on the bus because she was afraid to sleep at home. Not when she whispered, "Please don't tell," when I asked if she was okay. I started documenting everything. Photos of Sarah's injuries when she'd let me see them. Written notes about what she said when she said it. I had a small digital camera in my emergency kit, and I used it to take pictures whenever Sarah showed up with new bruises. The bruises got worse. Handprints on her shoulders, split lip, burn mark on her hand that she said came from touching the stove wrong. Every injury had an excuse that made no sense. I called the Alaska Department of Family Services in Anchorage. Took 3 tries to get through on the satellite phone from the school. I need to report child abuse in Wainwright, I told the social worker. Have you reported it to local authorities? The local police officer is the child's grandfather. The school principal is her uncle. They won't do anything. The social worker, a woman named Lisa, took down and all the information. Said they'd send someone out within 2 weeks. But 2 weeks was too long. Sarah was getting worse every day. She stopped talking except to answer direct questions. Started wearing long sleeves even inside the warm school building. The other kids began avoiding her, like whatever was happening was contagious. I tried talking to other parents, but they'd change the subject or walk away. The few who would talk said the same thing, not our business, and you don't understand. The village felt different too. People who'd been friendly started giving me cold looks. The grocery store clerk stopped making small talk. Even the school custodian avoided eye contact. My bus radio started having problems. Static during important calls. Sometimes it would pick up conversations that seemed to be about me. Voices I recognized, but couldn't quite place. She's causing trouble. Outsider doesn't know her place. Something needs to be done. When I asked about the radio problems, the school maintenance guy just shrugged. Arctic conditions mess with everything. You'll get used to it. But it wasn't the cold. It was fear. The whole village was afraid of something, and I was starting to understand what. The Akinga family had power here. Real power. The kind that could make problems disappear and keep secrets buried under the permafrost. And I was becoming a problem. The state social worker finally came on a Tuesday. Lisa flew in on the morning mail plane, a small woman in a government parka with a briefcase full of forms. I met her at the airstrip and took her straight to the school. "Where's Sarah Akinga?" she asked Principal Akinga. "Homesick with the flu. Been out for 3 days." But I'd driven the route that morning, and Sarah hadn't been waiting at her pickup spot. When I asked, her cousin said she was visiting relatives in Barrow. Lisa and I drove to the Akinga house anyway. No one answered the door, but I could see someone moving around inside. Footprints in the snow led from the house to an old storage shed, then disappeared like someone had been carried. "They're hiding her," I told Lisa. "I can't force entry without a warrant," she said, "but I'll file a report recommending immediate investigation." Lisa flew out that afternoon. I never heard from her again. I knew they'd hurt Sarah for bringing outside attention to the family. Maybe already had. I couldn't wait for the state to do something that might never happen. So I made a plan. Friday morning, instead of dropping Sarah at school, I'd drive straight through to Barrow. 40 miles on a road that was barely marked, but my bus could make it. The hospital in Barrow would have to examine her, photograph her injuries, call in real authorities who weren't related to her abuser. I packed extra fuel, emergency supplies, even wrote out a statement explaining what I was doing and why. If I lost my job, so be it. Sarah's life was worth more than my career. Friday morning came. I drove to the Akinga house at 7:15 like always. Sarah wasn't there. I waited 10 minutes, then knocked on the door. Sarah's father answered, still in his pajamas, smelling like alcohol and cigarettes. "Where's Sarah?" "Visiting her aunt in Barrow. Left yesterday." "What aunt? Give me her name and address." He started to close the door. "None of your business." I drove straight to the school and called every relative in Barrow I could find through directory assistance. None of them had seen Sarah. Most had never heard of any planned visit. Sarah had been gone for 3 days, and no one was looking for her except me. That afternoon, I started searching. Drove through every street in the village, checked every building. Most places were locked up tight, but there were old structures on the edge of town that hadn't been used in years. I found her clothes in an abandoned warehouse near the old DUW line station. Sarah's pink parka, torn and bloody. Her small mukluks, one still ties. One missing its laces. The clothes were cold, frozen to the wooden floor like they'd been there for days. But no Sarah. I took the clothes straight to Officer Akinga. "I found these in the old warehouse. Sarah's been murdered." He looked at the bloody parka without expression. "Looks like animal predation. Polar bear, maybe. Happens sometimes when kids wander off." "She didn't wander off. Someone killed her and hid the body." "You're making serious accusations without evidence, Janet. Could be seen as defamation of character." "Then investigate. Search the village. Do your job." He stood up, all 6 feet of him. "My job is keeping the peace. Right now you're disturbing that peace. I suggest you go home and think about whether you want to keep working here." I didn't go home. I went back to the Akinga house and knocked until Sarah's father answered. "I found her clothes. I know what you did." 3 men came out behind him. Sarah's uncle, her older cousin, and someone I didn't recognize. They formed a semicircle around me in the doorway. "Crazy white woman," Sarah's father said, "making up stories about good families." "Where's her body?" "There is no body," the uncle said. "Sarah's safe with relatives. Your wild accusations are hurting innocent people. Then bring her back. Let me see her." "You're not seeing anybody," the cousin said. "You're leaving town tonight or something bad might happen to you." They meant it. I could see it in their eyes. The same cold look Officer Akinga had given me. The same look that said outsiders who caused trouble didn't last long in Wainwright. But I couldn't leave. Not without finding Sarah. I barricaded myself in the school that night. Used the satellite phone to call the Alaska State Troopers in Anchorage. Told them everything. They said they'd send someone out as soon as weather permitted. Maybe 2 days. 2 days felt like forever. The men came that night. I could see their flashlights moving around the building, testing doors and windows. They didn't try to break in, just wanted me to know they were watching. I stayed awake, sitting in the principal's office with my back to the wall and the satellite phone in my hand. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow could be someone coming to silence me permanently. The state troopers arrived Sunday morning. 2 of them, Sergeant Williams and Trooper Jensen, flew in on a small plane that barely cleared the snowdrifts on the airstrip. I met them with all my evidence. Photos of Sarah's injuries, the bloody clothes, notes about everything that had happened. They listened without interrupting, asked good questions, treated me like a reliable witness instead of a crazy outsider. They found Sarah's body that afternoon, buried in the permafrost behind her house, wrapped in a tarp like garbage. The autopsy would show she'd died from blunt force trauma to the head. Multiple injuries over several weeks. She'd been dead for 4 days. Sarah's father confessed when they showed him the evidence, said she wouldn't stop crying and needed to learn respect. Her uncle admitted to helping hide the body and threatening me to keep quiet. Both men got life sentences. The village police officer lost his job for failing to investigate. The principal was fired for covering up reports of abuse. I left Wainwright the day after they found Sarah's body. Couldn't stay in a place where a little girl's murder was considered family business, and reporting it made you the enemy. I still drive school buses, but I never took another job in a remote village. Work in Fairbanks now, where there are multiple law enforcement agencies and social workers who aren't related to the families they investigate. I think about Sarah every day. Wonder if I could have saved her if I'd acted faster, pushed harder, broken more rules. The state investigation found that other children in the village had been abused for years, all covered up by the same network of relatives in positions of power. Sometimes I get letters from people in Wainwright. Most are thank you notes from parents whose children are safer now because someone finally spoke up. A few are threats from people who think I destroyed their community. But the letter that matters most came from Sarah's teacher. She wrote that the school now has mandatory reporting protocols that can't be ignored by family connections, that outside social workers visit every month, that children have someone safe to talk to when they're being hurt at home. Sarah didn't die for nothing. Her death changed everything in Wainwright, made it impossible for families to hide abuse behind tradition and silence. I learned something important in that frozen village at the edge of the world. Evil doesn't need supernatural powers to destroy innocent lives. It just needs good people to look the other way and trust the wrong authorities. If you work with children in any capacity, don't ever ignore the signs. Don't let family connections or community pressure stop you from protecting a child who can't protect themselves, because sometimes you're the only thing standing between a little girl and the monsters who are supposed to love her, and sometimes that has to be enough. My name is Mike Petrov, and I've been a fishing boat captain for 28 years. Started when I was just 24, working the waters around Cordova, Alaska. I've seen storms that could flip a house, ice that cuts through steel like butter, and waves tall as buildings. Lost friends to this ocean, saved others when their luck ran out. But what happened in September 2019 changed everything I thought I knew about trust and survival. Sometimes the deadliest thing on your boat isn't the storm outside. The Arctic Dawn was my pride. 60-foot steel hull, twin diesel engines, and fish holds that could carry 10,000 pounds of salmon. She'd been my boat for 12 years, and I knew every bolt, every wire, every sound she made. The Coast Guard inspected her every season. Insurance company checked her twice a year. She was solid. September 15, 2019. Weather reports showed clear skies for the next week. Perfect time for one last salmon run before winter shut us down. I picked my usual crew, guys I'd worked with for years. Danny Walsh, 29, been my deckhand for 3 seasons. Smart kid, good with the nets, never complained about the long hours. Pete Morrison, 34, strongest man I ever worked with. Could haul a full net by himself if needed. Tony Castellano, 41, been fishing these waters longer than anyone. If Tony said fish were running, you could bet your house on it. We loaded up for 10 days. Fuel tanks topped off. 800 gallons of marine diesel. Ice machine working perfect. Radio equipment all tested. Emergency beacon checked and registered. Life raft inspected just 2 months before. Everything by the book. Danny seemed nervous that morning. Kept checking his phone, looking over his shoulder. When I asked what was wrong, he said he owed some guys money back in town. Gambling debts. I told him this trip would pay good, salmon pre. Sizz were up, and I knew where they were schooling. He just nodded and went back to loading gear. We left Cordova Harbor at 5 a.m. Smooth water, light wind from the southwest. Perfect conditions. The guys were in good spirits, talking about their plans for the money. Pete wanted to buy his wife a new truck. Tony was saving for his daughter's college. Danny didn't say much about his plans. First 2 days went perfect. We found the salmon exactly where I expected. Big kings, some over 30 pounds. The holds were filling fast. Everyone was working hard, sharing jokes, looking forward to a profitable trip. Even Danny seemed to relax once we got out on the water. Then day 3 happened. September 18th, around 2 p.m. We were 40 miles southwest of Cordova when the engine started making a weird noise. Not the usual diesel rumble, but something wrong. A grinding sound like metal on metal. I throttled back and called Pete to check the engine room. He came back up white as a sheet. "Mike, you need to see this." I followed him down. The engine compartment reeked of diesel fuel. Fuel lines were spraying everywhere, but this wasn't normal wear. The lines looked like someone had poured acid on them. Metal was eaten away. Rubber hoses cracked and split. 40 years on the water, and I'd never seen damage like this. This didn't just happen, Pete said. Someone did this. That's when the storm hit. Weather can change fast in Alaska, but this was something else. 1 minute we had calm seas. Next minute, 30-foot waves were slamming the boat. Wind went from 10 knots to 60 in less than an hour. No warning on the radio, no signs on the horizon, just instant chaos. The engines died completely. We were dead in the water, taking waves over the bow. Emergency power kept the bilge pumps running, but barely. I tried the radio to call the Coast Guard. Static. Lightning had fried our main antenna during the first wave of the storm. That's when Danny broke down and told us the truth. "I did it," he said, crying. "I put acid on the fuel lines. I owe $40,000 to some very bad people in Anchorage. They said if I didn't pay by October 1st, they'd kill me. The boat's insured for $500,000. I figured we'd sink, everyone would get rescued, and I'd get enough insurance money to pay them off." Pete grabbed Danny by the shirt. "You crazy idiot! You're going to kill us all!" Tony was checking the damage below. "Pumps can't keep up," he yelled. "We're taking on water faster than we can pump it out." I stared at Danny. 3 years I'd trusted this kid. Brought him into my crew like family. Fed him, paid him good wages, taught him everything I knew about fishing. And he was willing to kill us all for gambling money. "The Coast Guard will find us," Danny said. "They always do. Emergency beacon's working." I checked the beacon. Dead. Battery compartment was full of the same acid that ate the fuel lines. Danny had planned this whole thing. Sabotage the boat, disable the emergency equipment, let us sink, then play the survivor when help came. But something had gone wrong with his plan. The storm wasn't supposed to happen. We were supposed to sink in calm water, easy rescue. Instead, we were 40 miles from shore in 60-knot winds and 30-foot seas. "They'll never find us in this storm," Pete said. "Search planes can't fly, Coast Guard cutters can't make it out here." That's when I saw the look in Danny's eyes change. The crying stopped. The fear turned into something else. Something cold. "Well," he said, "then we stick to the story. This was an accident. Engine failure during a storm. No one's fault." Tony came up from below, blood on his hands from where he'd cut himself on sharp metal. "Danny, you need to help us fix this. We got maybe 6 hours before she goes down." Danny pulled a knife from his belt, 8-inch filleting blade, sharp enough to cut through bone. No one's fixing anything, and no one's telling anyone what really happened here. That's when I understood. Danny wasn't just trying to scam insurance money. He was planning to kill us all. Dead men can't tell stories about sabotage. "Danny, put the knife down," I said. "We can work this out." He laughed. "Work it out? You think those guys in Anchorage care about working things out? I'm dead if I don't pay them. So either we all stick to the accident story, or some of us don't make it home to tell any story at all." The boat lurched hard to starboard. We were listing bad now, water pouring in faster than our pumps could handle. Maybe 2 hours before she went under. Tony tried to reason with him. "Danny, think about this. We've been friends for years. I taught you how to mend nets, how to read the fish finder. We can figure out another way to get you the money." "Too late for that," Danny said. He was backing toward the life raft, keeping the knife pointed at us. "Way too late." Pete made his move. 40 years of hauling nets made him strong and fast. He lunged at Danny, trying to grab the knife. They fought on the tilting deck, both of them slipping on the wet planks. I tried to help, but the boat rolled again, throwing me against the wheelhouse. When I looked up, Tony was between Danny and Pete, trying to break up the fight. That's when Danny stabbed him. The blade went right into Tony's chest, just below his left shoulder. Tony looked surprised more than hurt. He touched the wound, saw the blood on his fingers, and looked at Danny like he couldn't believe what just happened. "You stabbed me," Tony said. "You actually stabbed me." Danny pulled the knife out. Tony stumbled backward, blood soaking his shirt. Another wave hit the boat and Tony lost his balance. He fell over the side rail into the churning water. I grabbed a life ring and threw it toward him, but the current was too strong. Tony tried to swim back to the boat, but he was losing blood fast. The water around him turned red. That's when I saw the fins. 3 of them, cutting through the water toward Tony. Sharks. The blood was calling them in. Tony saw them too. He started swimming harder, but he was getting weaker. "Help me!" he screamed. "Please help me!" I tried to get a rope to him, but the boat was drifting too fast. Pete tackled Danny, trying to get the knife away. They rolled across the deck, fighting for control. Tony's screaming stopped. The water churned red and white, then went quiet. The fins disappeared. Tony was gone. "You murdered him," Pete said, pinning Danny to the deck. "You murdered Tony." Danny was still holding the knife. He was going to tell. They'd all tell. Now it's just you two. I helped Pete tie Danny up with dock line. We used every knot we knew, binding his hands behind his back, tying his feet together. He kept saying we were making a mistake, that we should just stick to his story about the accident. But the boat was sinking fast now. Water was almost to the deck level. The life raft was our only chance, but it was only designed for 3 people. 4 if you didn't mind being really uncomfortable. With Tony dead, there were 3 of us left. The raft would be crowded but manageable. Pete looked at Danny, then at me. "We should leave him," he said. "He killed Tony. He tried to kill us all. Let him go down with the boat." Part of me wanted to agree. Danny had destroyed everything. My boat, my livelihood, my trust in people. He'd murdered a good man and tried to murder the rest of us. The ocean would be his judge and jury. But I couldn't do it. 28 years as a captain, and I'd never left anyone behind. Not even someone who tried to kill me. "We take him," I said. "We're not murderers like him." Pete shook his head but helped me drag Danny to the life raft. We launched it just as the Arctic Dawn's bow went under. She slipped beneath the waves with barely a sound, taking 12 years of my life with her. The 3 of us crowded into a raft meant for 2. Danny was tied up. Peace. T and I took turns paddling and bailing water. The storm raged for another 6 hours. Waves tossed us around like a toy, but the raft held together. When dawn came, the storm was gone. Calm seas, clear sky. Perfect weather for a rescue. We fired our flares and activated the emergency beacon from the raft's survival kit. 18 hours after the Arctic Dawn sank, we heard the helicopter. Coast Guard Jayhawk out of Kodiak. They hauled us up one by one. Danny first, still tied up, then Pete, then me. The Coast Guard investigators found Tony's body 3 days later. Shark bites, but also the stab wound. Danny's knife was still on the ocean floor with my boat, but the medical examiner could tell what kind of blade made the wound. Danny tried to stick to his story about the accident, but Pete and I told the truth. The investigators found evidence of the acid on some metal pieces that washed ashore. Danny's phone records showed calls to known criminals in Anchorage. His bank records showed the gambling debts. He was convicted of murder in the 1st degree and criminal sabotage. Life in prison without parole. The prosecutor called me a hero for saving the man who tried to kill me. I don't feel like a hero. I feel like an old fool who trusted the wrong person. I sold my fishing license after that. Couldn't afford another boat, and insurance companies don't like captains whose crew members commit sabotage. I work at the harbor now, maintaining other people's boats. Steady pay, no excitement. Home every night. Sometimes people ask me if I miss being out on the water. I tell them I miss the fish, I miss the independence, I miss the good crews I worked with over the years. But I don't miss wondering if the person standing next to me is planning to kill me for money. The ocean's dangerous enough without bringing human evil aboard with you. These days, I stick to shallow water and people I've known for decades. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal like bone. It stays broken forever. If you ever find yourself working with someone who seems desperate, someone who owes money to dangerous people, be careful. Desperation makes people do things they never thought they could do. And sometimes the biggest storm isn't the one outside your boat. It's the one standing right next to you. Chairman Martinez. State your name and credentials for the record. Ms. Tompkins. My name is Rebecca Marie Tompkins. I'm a registered nurse, license number RN-AK8847. I've been practicing for 7 years. I got my nursing degree from University of Alaska Anchorage in 2014. After graduation, I worked at Providence, Alaska Medical Center in Anchorage for 3 years. Emergency room mostly. Trauma cases, cardiac arrests, overdoses. You see everything there. In 2017, I took the position as the sole medical provider for the Shaktoolik Health Clinic. It's a small village on the Bering Sea coast, population 2 of 50, mostly Inupiat families. The clinic serves 5 surrounding villages too. When people can't get to Nome or Anchorage, I'm all they have. I handle everything. Births, deaths, broken bones, heart attacks, diabetic emergencies, everything. I moved there because I wanted to make a real difference. These communities are forgotten by most of the medical world. They needed someone who cared. I thought I was prepared for anything. I was wrong. Chairman Martinez. Describe the events of winter 2021 that led to this hearing. Ms. Tompkins. It started in November. The first snowfall came early that year, and the village heating systems were working overtime. The clinic was busier than usual, but nothing seemed unusual at first. Just the normal winter stuff. Respiratory infections, accidents from icy conditions, elderly folks struggling with the cold. The clinic is a small building, maybe 1,200 square feet total. 2 examination rooms, a small surgical area, basic X-ray equipment, and my office. We have a satellite phone for emergencies and a radio system that connects to the other villages. The generator runs most of our equipment because the power grid isn't reliable. My daily routine was always the same. Check the generator fuel levels, test the radio, review accounts, nigh overnight messages from the other villages. The medicine refrigerator needed constant monitoring because if the power went out, we'd lose all our vaccines and insulin. I kept detailed logs of everything: temperatures, inventory, patient visits. The state requires it for rural clinics. The heating system in the clinic was old but worked fine. It burned coal like most buildings in the village. The coal came from a supplier in Fairbanks, delivered by barge during the summer months. Each building had a coal shed where we stored enough fuel to last the winter. Chairman Martinez. When did you first notice the unusual respiratory cases? Ms. Tompkins. December 1st, 2021. A mother brought in her 4-year-old daughter, Emma Kanguk. The child had a severe cough that sounded different from anything I'd heard before. It was wet and crackling, but also had this metallic wheeze. Her breathing was labored and she was running a low-grade fever. I examined her lungs with my stethoscope. The sound was wrong. Instead of clear air movement or even normal congestion, there was this grinding noise with each breath, like sandpaper rubbing together inside her chest. I'd never heard anything like it in 7 years of nursing. I started her on antibiotics and albuterol treatments for the breathing problems, standard protocol for respiratory infections in children. I told the mother to bring her back in 2 days if she didn't improve. The next day, 2 more children came in with identical symptoms. Same wet, crackling cough, same metallic wheeze, same grinding sounds in their lungs. Both were under 5 years old. I started them on the same treatment protocol. By December 3rd, I had 12 children with these symptoms, all under 5, all from different families scattered around the village. The antibiotics weren't working. If anything, the children were getting worse. Chairman M. Martinez. What was your assessment at that time? Ms. Tompkins. I suspected some kind of environmental contamination. 12 children with identical, unusual respiratory symptoms don't just happen by coincidence. I started asking the families detailed questions about their daily routines, what the children ate, where they played, what they were exposed to. The common factor was obvious. They all lived in houses heated by coal from the same supplier. But coal-heated homes were normal in Shaktoolik. Families had been using coal heat for decades without these problems. I called the state health department on December 3rd to report the cluster of cases. The connection was terrible. It always was during winter storms. I spoke with Dr. Sarah Chen, the regional epidemiologist. I described the symptoms and requested immediate medical evacuation for the sickest children to Anchorage. Dr. Chen denied the evacuation request. She said weather conditions made flights impossible and that my description didn't warrant emergency transport. She told me to continue supportive care and send detailed reports of all cases. That same evening, Emma Kanguk died. Chairman Martinez. Describe what happened. Ms. Tompkins. Her mother called me at 11:47 p.m. Emma was having severe breathing difficulties. I grabbed my emergency bag and ran to their house. It's maybe 200 yards from the clinic, but the wind was brutal that night. Visibility was almost zero. When I got there, Emma was in full respiratory distress. Her lips were blue and she couldn't speak. I could hear fluid in her lungs without even using the stethoscope. I started emergency oxygen and called for a medical evacuation on the satellite phone. The dispatcher in Anchorage said no flights could get through until the storm passed, minimum 48-hour delay. Emma couldn't wait 48 minutes, let alone 48 hours. I worked on her for 3 hours. CPR, manual ventilation, everything I could do with the equipment I had, but her lungs were filling up faster than I could clear them. She died at 2:23 a.m. on December 4th. In children, die before. In the ER in Anchorage, we lost kids to trauma, congenital defects, cancer. It's horrible, but you understand the cause. This was different. Emma died because her lungs were drowning from the inside, and I had no idea why. Chairman Martinez. What did you do next? Ms. Tompkins. I made a decision that I know violated protocol. With the family's permission, I performed an examination of Emma's lungs. Not a full autopsy. I'm not qualified for that. But I needed to see what was killing these children. What I found changed everything. Emma's lungs were filled with a black granular substance. It wasn't fluid or blood or normal infection discharge. It looked like fine sand mixed with dark powder. The substance was coating the inside of her airways and filling the tiny air sacs where oxygen exchange happens. I collected samples in sterile containers and tested them with the basic chemistry kit we keep at the clinic for urinalysis and blood work. The results showed high levels of carbon particles and what appeared to be asbestos fibers. I photographed everything and documented the findings. 3 more children died over the next week, all with the same black substance in their lungs. I performed the same examination each time, with family permission. The pattern was identical. Chairman Martinez. How did you determine the source of contamination? Ms. Tompkins. I started testing everything in the village that could produce airborne particles. The coal was the obvious suspect, so I took samples from several homes' coal supplies. Using the clinic's basic testing equipment, I found that the coal was contaminated with industrial waste. I contacted the coal supplier, Arctic Fuel Distribution in Fairbanks. The owner, Marcus Webb, initially denied any problems with his product, but when I threatened to involve federal environmental agencies, he admitted that he'd been mixing demolished building materials with the coal to increase his profit margins. The coal he'd been selling to rural villages was actually about 40% heating, coal and 60% ground-up construction waste, including asbestos insulation from old buildings. He'd been poisoning entire communities to save money on disposal costs. Chairman Martinez. What was the response when you reported these findings? Ms. Tompkins. I immediately contacted Dr. Chen again and demanded emergency evacuation for all affected children. I sent her the photographs, test results, and my documentation. I told her we had a mass poisoning event that required immediate intervention. Dr. Chen's response was that my testing methods were unreliable and outside the scope of nursing practice. She said the basic chemistry kit wasn't designed for environmental testing and that my findings couldn't be considered valid without proper laboratory analysis. She was technically correct, but children were dying while we waited for proper procedures. I also contacted the village council to inform them of the contamination. The council consists of 5 elected members, mostly older men who'd lived in Shaktoolik their entire lives. I expected them to be outraged and demand immediate action. Instead, they were angry with me. Council Chairman Peter Kanguk, Emma's grandfather, accused me of creating panic and disrespecting the dead by examining his granddaughter's body. Other council members were worried about the economic impact if the village had to switch heating sources midwinter. Marcus Webb had called the council before I could meet with them. He'd offered to provide free coal for the rest of the winter if they would handle the situation locally. The council voted 4-1 to continue using the contaminated coal and to ask me to stop interfering with village business. Chairman Martinez: How did you respond to this decision? Ms. Tompkins: I couldn't watch more children die. I started secretly contacting families and urging them to leave the village immediately. I told them their children would die if they stayed. Some families listened and made arrangements to stay with relatives in other villages or in Nome, but many families had no transportation and nowhere to go. The village is isolated, no road access, and flights were expensive and weather-dependent. I realized that telling people to leave wasn't enough. I had to do something more. I started hiding children in the clinic overnight. I told their parents it was for observation and treatment, but really I was getting them away from the contaminated air in their homes. I set up cots in the examination rooms and kept the clinic's air filtration system running constantly. By mid-December, I had 8 children staying at the clinic full-time. Their parents would visit during the day, but the kids slept and spent most of their time in the cleaner air environment. Some of them started showing improvement after a few days away from the contaminated coal smoke. Chairman Martinez: When did the situation escalate further? Ms. Tompkins: Marcus Webb found out about my interference when several families canceled their coal orders and demanded refunds. He drove to Shaktoolik on December 18th, took a charter flight and then snowmobile from the airstrip. He went straight to the village council and offered them a deal: free coal for 2 years if they would file a formal complaint against me with the state medical board. He claimed I was practicing medicine beyond my scope and creating mass hysteria. The council agreed. Peter Kanguk was still furious about the examination I'd performed on Emma. He felt I'd violated cultural traditions around death and dishonored his family. The economic pressure was also real. The village couldn't afford alternative heating sources on short notice. On December 20th, I received a call from the state medical board informing MES that I was under investigation for professional misconduct. Dr. Richard Morrison, the board chairman, told me to cease all activities outside my defined scope of practice and to cooperate with the investigation. The irony was incredible. Children were dying from preventable poisoning, and I was being investigated for trying to save them. Chairman Martinez: What was the final outcome? Ms. Tompkins: 9 children died total. 23 others suffered permanent lung damage that will affect them for the rest of their lives. The youngest victim was 2 years old. The oldest was 6. The state health department eventually sent a proper investigation team in January 2022, after the weather cleared. They confirmed everything I'd documented. The coal was contaminated with asbestos and other toxic materials. Marcus Webb was knowingly selling industrial waste as heating fuel, but by then, it was too late for those children. Marcus Webb was never prosecuted. The state attorney general's office said there wasn't enough evidence to prove criminal intent, even though he'd admitted to mixing construction waste with the coal. Arctic Fuel Distribution paid a $50,000 fine to the Environmental Protection Agency and continued operating. I was found guilty of exceeding the scope of nursing practice and performing unauthorized medical procedures. My license was revoked in March 2022. The board ruled that I should have followed proper channels and waited for official investigation, regardless of the immediate danger to the children. Chairman Martinez: Do you have any final statement for this hearing? Ms. Tompkins: I did what any nurse should do when children are dying. I tried to save them. The system failed those children, the health department, the village council, the legal system, and now this medical board. I would make the same choices again. Every nurse takes an oath to do no harm and to advocate for their patients. That's exactly what I did. If following proper procedures means watching children die when you know how to save them, and the procedures are wrong. Those families in Shaktoolik trusted me to protect their children. I failed 9 of them because I followed the rules for too long. I won't make that mistake again. I'm appealing this decision, and I'll continue fighting until every one of those children gets justice. Chairman Martinez. This hearing is adjourned. The board will issue its final ruling within 30 days. Rebecca Tompkins' appeal was denied in August 2022. She currently works as a health advocate for rural indigenous communities operating outside the formal medical system. The Shaktoolik clinic remains closed due to staffing shortages. Marcus Webb's company continues to supply fuel to rural Alaska villages. My name is Jake Morrison, and I've been working construction for 15 years. Started right out of high school, worked my way up from carrying tools to running heavy machinery. I've done everything. Roads, buildings, bridges, you name it. I've worked in freezing cold, blazing heat, and conditions that would make most people quit on the spot. But what happened in March of this year, 20 feet under the streets of Ketchikan, Alaska, changed everything I thought I knew about what lives beneath our feet. I've seen some weird stuff on job sites before. Old bones, weird artifacts, sometimes things that don't belong where you find them. But this was different. This was something that should have stayed buried. The job seemed simple enough when we got the contract. The city of Ketchikan hired our company, Morrison Construction, yeah, same last name but no relation to the owner, to expand the underground utility tunnels beneath the historic downtown district. The old sewer system couldn't handle the growing population, especially during tourist season when the cruise ships came in. Our crew was small, just 6 guys total. Me, Tommy Valdez, who'd been my partner for 8 years, Rick Santos, our foreman, and 3 newer guys, Mike, Dave, and a kid named Chris, who was barely 21. We had all the right equipment, a Caterpillar 320 excavator, pneumatic drills, laser levels, the works. The plan was to dig new sewer lines about 20 feet below street level, connecting to the existing system 3 blocks over. The work area was right in the heart of downtown, between Creek Street and Front Street. Historic area, lots of old buildings from the early 1900s when Ketchikan was booming with salmon canneries and lumber mills. The city made us work night shifts to avoid disrupting traffic and businesses. Made sense, but working underground in the dark always feels different. More isolated. We started on a Monday night in March. Temperature was about 35 degrees above ground, but once you get down in the tunnels, it stays pretty constant, cold and damp. The smell hit you first, that musty earth smell mixed with old concrete and something else I couldn't quite place. Something that reminded me of my grandfather's root cellar back in Montana. The first 2 days went smooth. We'd dig, haul out debris, set up supports, move forward, standard procedure. The soil was mostly clay and gravel, easy to work with. Rick kept us on schedule, and we were making good time. The city inspector came by Tuesday night, signed off on our progress, said we should be done within 2 weeks. Then Wednesday night happened. We were about 18 feet down, maybe 50 feet in from the street entrance. I was operating the excavator, scooping out another load of dirt and rocks when the bucket hit something hard. Not rock. I know the sound rock makes. Not a pipe either. We had all the utility maps. This was something else. "Hold up, Jake," Rick called out. He climbed down into the hole with his flashlight. "What'd you hit?" I backed the excavator up and killed the engine. The sudden silence felt weird after hours of machinery noise. That's when I first heard it. A sound like wind moving through empty spaces coming from somewhere below us. Rick was running his hands over what we'd uncovered. "Jesus Christ," he said, which got all of us moving. Rick never swore unless something was seriously wrong. I grabbed my flashlight and dropped down into the excavation. What I saw made no sense at all. We'd uncovered the top of what looked like a stone wall. But not modern stone. This stuff was huge blocks, fitted together so perfectly you couldn't slide a knife blade between them. Each block was maybe 3 feet wide, 2 feet high, made of some kind of dark gray. A stone I'd never seen before, and carved into every single block were symbols. Not letters or words, but symbols. Curved lines and angular shapes that seemed to twist and turn when you looked at them. They were carved deep, like whoever made them wanted them to last forever. Tommy ran his fingers over one of the symbols and jerked his hand back. "That stone's cold," he said. "Like, really cold. Colder than it should be down here." Rick was already on his radio, calling the office. Standard procedure when you find something historical. You stop work and call it in. But his radio just made static. No signal 20 feet underground wasn't unusual, but his face looked worried. "All right," Rick said. "We follow protocol, we dig around it, see how big this thing is, then decide how to proceed. City's probably going to want archaeologists to look at it, which means delays, which means we're probably going to lose money on this job." Nobody was happy about that, but we'd all dealt with historical finds before. Usually turned out to be old building foundations or forgotten basements. We started digging carefully around the stone structure, exposing more of the wall. But the symbols kept bothering me. I'd look away, then look back, and I'd swear they'd moved slightly. Not big movements, just little shifts, like the carved lines were settling into slightly different positions. I mentioned it to Tommy, but he just laughed. "You've been staring at them too long," he said. "Your eyes are playing tricks." Maybe he was right. But I'd been doing construction for 15 years, and I'd learned to trust my eyes. Something about those symbols wasn't natural. We worked until 6 in the morning, exposing about 20 feet of the stone wall. It was perfectly straight, running east to west, and it was old, really old. The stones on top had been damaged by years of construction above, but the lower blocks were perfect. Whatever civilization built this knew what they were doing. Thursday night, we came back to continue the excavation. The plan was to expose the full perimeter of the structure, then tunnel around it. The city had already sent word that work could continue as long as we didn't damage the stones. But something had changed overnight. The gap between two of the stones, a gap that had been maybe an inch wide when we left, was now 3 inches wide, and it was dark inside that gap. Not just dark, black, like looking into the deepest cave you could imagine. "Did we hit that with the excavator yesterday?" Rick asked, examining the gap. I shook my head. "We were careful. Never touched those stones directly." Rick shined his flashlight into the gap, trying to see how deep it went. The beam just disappeared. Whatever was behind those stones was hollow and big. That's when we heard the scratching. It was faint at first, like mice in the walls. But as we all went quiet and listened, it got clearer. Something was scratching at stone from inside the structure. Not random scratching, rhythmic, deliberate. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Pause. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Pause. Chris, the young kid, backed away from the wall. "What the hell is that?" "Probably just water," Rick said, but his voice didn't sound convinced. "Old drainage system settling or something." But I knew the sound of water, and this wasn't water. This sounded like claws, long claws, scraping against stone. We tried to continue working, but everyone was on edge. Every time the excavator started up, we'd all listen when it stopped, waiting for that scratching sound, and it was always there. Sometimes louder, sometimes softer, but always that same rhythm. Around 2 in the morning, the scratching stopped completely. The sudden silence was almost worse than the noise. That's when Tommy called me over to look at something. He'd been cleaning dirt off one section of the wall, and what he'd found made my blood run cold. The stones weren't just carved with symbols. Some of the symbols were fresh. Not ancient fresh, recent fresh, like something had been carving new symbols from inside the structure. "Jake," Tommy whispered, "these symbols, they're different. From yesterday, I'm sure of it." I compared them to photos I'd taken on my phone the night before. He was right. New symbols had appeared, carved in the same deep style as the ancient ones, but the stone dust around them was fresh. Something inside that stone structure was alive, and it was trying to communicate, or trying to get out. Friday night, I almost didn't come to work. My wife Sarah had been asking questions about why I'd been so quiet all week, why I kept checking the locks on our doors before bed. But construction workers don't get paid sick days, and I needed this job. The gap in the stones was wider when we arrived, 6 inches now, and that black emptiness behind it seemed to pull at your eyes. Mike had brought a stronger flashlight, one of those LED spotlights with 3,000 lumens. When he shined it into the gap, we could see that the space behind the wall was definitely hollow and big. "I'm going to take a closer look," I told Rick. "Jake, I don't think that's a good idea." But I was already moving toward the wall. 15 years of construction had made me curious about how things were built, and this stone structure was the most interesting thing I'd ever found. I wanted to understand what we were dealing with. I got down on my knees and put my face close to the gap. The LED spotlight lit up a chamber that had to be at least 20 feet across. The walls were covered in those symbols, thousands of them, carved from floor to ceiling. But what caught my attention was the floor. It was covered in bones. Not human bones, at least I didn't think so. These were long and thin, like bird bones, but bigger, much bigger. They were scattered everywhere like something had been eating and just throwing the leftovers aside. I was about to pull back when I saw movement in the shadows at the far end of the chamber. Something large was moving back there, something that didn't want to come into the light. I could see parts of it, a glimpse of pale white skin, something that might have been a hand, but with fingers too long to be human. "There's something in there," I whispered to Tommy. "Something alive." That's when the hand shot through the gap. It happened so fast I barely had time to jerk backward. A massive pale white hand thrust through the opening, fingers spread wide, claws scraping against the stone edges of the gap. The fingers were at least 8 inches long, ending in black claws that looked sharp enough to cut through steel. The hand swept back and forth, trying to grab whatever was outside the chamber, trying to grab me. I scrambled backward so fast I tripped over my own feet. The hand kept reaching, clawing at the air where I'd been a second before. Up close, I could see that the skin wasn't just pale, it was translucent. I could see dark veins running underneath and the muscles moving as those impossible fingers flexed and grasped. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the hand withdrew back into the darkness. The entire crew was staring at the gap in complete silence. Even Rick looked shaken. "We're done," Rick said finally. "Everyone pack up. We're getting out of here." "What about the job?" Dave asked. "Screw the job. I'm not losing anybody to whatever that thing is." We threw our tools into the truck and climbed out of that tunnel faster than I'd ever moved on a job site. Rick tried his radio again once we got to street level, but all he got was static. His cell phone showed no signal either, even though we were in the middle of downtown Ketchikan. "I'll call the office from the hotel," Rick said. "We're reporting this to the city, to the state, to whoever will listen. This is way above our pay grade." But when Rick called the office Saturday morning, our supervisor Mike Grady just laughed. "Cave-in hallucination," Grady said. "Bad air down there can make you see all kinds of things. You guys have been working too many night shifts. Take the weekend off, come back Monday, and finish the job." Rick tried to explain what we'd seen, but Grady cut him off. "Look, Rick, the city's paying us good money for this job. We're not walking away because you guys got spooked by some shadows. Monday night, you go back down there and finish the tunnel." Monday night came, and we were back in the tunnel. But something had changed over the weekend. The gap in the stones was now wide enough for a person to crawl through. And there were marks in the concrete walls of our tunnel. Deep scratches, like something with very large claws had been testing the strength of our construction. The scratch marks led away from the stone structure toward the tunnel entrance, toward the surface. "It got out," Tommy said quietly. We followed the claw marks up the tunnel. They continued up the access ladder across the street and disappeared down a storm drain opening 3 blocks away in downtown Ketchikan. That was when we found the dogs. 3 stray dogs, all dead, all found within 2 blocks of that storm drain. Each one had been torn apart by something with claws, long black claws that left marks identical to what we'd seen in the tunnel. I quit that night. Didn't even go back for my last paycheck. Tommy quit too, and so did Chris. Rick tried to convince us to stay, said we were overreacting, but I'd seen enough. The city finished the tunnel project with a different construction company. According to the newspaper, they sealed up the stone structure with concrete and continued the sewer line around it. The official report said they'd found historical artifacts of unknown origin, but nothing dangerous. But I know what's really down there, and I know it's not sealed up anymore, because 3 months later, more dogs started turning up dead around Ketchikan. Same claw marks, same wounds, and sometimes, late at night, people report hearing scratching sounds coming from the storm drains down. In town, the scratching is rhythmic, deliberate. Scratch, 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 pause, scratch, 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 pause, just like what we heard in the tunnel. I don't work construction anymore. Sarah and I moved back to Montana last month. I got a job at a hardware store. Indoor work, daylight hours, no digging. But sometimes I still dream about that pale white hand reaching through the gap in the stones. And I wake up wondering what else is buried under our cities, waiting for someone to dig too deep and let it out. If you ever work construction, and you find something that doesn't belong, something old and covered in symbols you don't recognize, walk away. Don't let curiosity get the better of you like it did me. Some things are buried for a reason, and some things should stay buried forever. My name is Sarah Chen, and I've been teaching elementary school for 8 years. I got my degree from the University of Alaska and started working right here in Bethel after graduation. I love working with kids, watching them learn to read, helping them solve math problems, seeing their faces light up when they finally understand something new. I've dealt with all kinds of students over the years. Shy kids, loud kids, kids with learning problems, kids from tough homes. I thought I'd seen everything. But what happened in October 2022 at Bethel Elementary changed everything I thought I knew about children. And it made me realize that sometimes the thing sitting in your classroom isn't a child at all. October 15th, 2022. I remember the exact date because that's when my principal, Mrs. Rodriguez, brought Tommy Uki to my classroom. It was Monday morning, right after we finished the Pledge of Allegiance. "Mrs. Chen, this is Tommy," she said, putting her hand on the boy's shoulder. "He's new to Bethel and will be joining your class." Tommy looked like any normal 8-year-old boy. Dark hair, brown eyes, about average height for 3rd grade. He wore a blue hoodie and jeans, had a plain black backpack. Nothing strange about him at first glance. "Hi, Tommy," I said, smiling. "Would you like to tell the class a little about yourself?" He just shook his head and looked down at his shoes. "That's okay," I told him. "Sometimes it takes time to feel comfortable." I showed him to an empty desk near the window. He sat down quietly and didn't say a word for the rest of the morning. At Bethel Elementary, we only have 85 students total, so getting a new kid in the middle of the semester was unusual. Most families move here in summer, not halfway through the school year. But Alaska is different. People come and go for work, following fishing seasons or oil jobs. The first week, Tommy Essen seemed perfectly normal. He was quiet, polite, turned in his homework on time. He never caused any problems, never talked back, never got in trouble. If anything, he was too perfect. Most kids his age can't sit still for 5 minutes, but Tommy could sit perfectly still for hours. The first thing I noticed was lunchtime. Every day, Tommy would sit at the cafeteria table with his lunchbox, but he never ate anything. He would just sit there and watch the other kids eat. Not staring in a hungry way, but watching them like he was studying how they chewed, how they swallowed, how they talked while eating. When I asked him about it, he said he wasn't hungry. I thought maybe he was nervous being the new kid and all. But after a whole week of not eating, I started to worry. "Tommy, you need to eat lunch," I told him one day. "Growing boys need food." He looked at me with those dark eyes and said, "I don't need food like they do." That was a weird thing for a kid to say, but I figured he meant he wasn't used to school lunch yet. The second thing I noticed was how Tommy watched the other children. During reading time, math time, art class, His eyes would follow every movement. When Jenny got up to sharpen her pencil, Tommy's head would turn and track her across the room. When Marcus dropped his eraser, Tommy would watch him bend down to pick it up. It was like watching a cat watch mice. I tried calling the emergency contact number on Tommy's enrollment form. The number was disconnected. I checked with the office, and Mrs. Rodriguez said she'd gotten the paperwork from Tommy's guardian. But when I asked to see it, she couldn't find the file anywhere. "These things happen," she said. "Paperwork gets mixed up. The important thing is the boy is in school and learning." But I wanted to talk to his family. As a teacher, you develop relationships with parents. You call home when Diaz do well or when they're struggling. With Tommy, I had no way to reach anyone. By the second week, the other kids started acting differently around Tommy. During group work, nobody wanted to be his partner. At recess, kids would move away when he came near the swings or slide. I asked Jenny Martinez, one of my brightest students, what was wrong. "He's weird, Mrs. Chen," she whispered. "He sounds like other people sometimes." "What do you mean?" "Yesterday during math, he said something in Marcus's voice, exactly like Marcus, but it was Tommy talking." I thought she was imagining things. Kids have active imaginations, and sometimes they see patterns that aren't really there. But then I heard it myself. It was Thursday morning. We were doing reading circles, and Tommy was in the group by the window. I heard him say, "Can I go to the bathroom?" in what sounded exactly like Sarah Kim's voice. Same tone, same accent, everything. But when I looked over, it was definitely Tommy who had spoken. "Tommy, did you just ask something?" I said. He looked at me with those dark eyes and said in his normal voice, "No, Mrs. Chen." But I knew what I'd heard. That afternoon, I stayed late to catch up on grading. Around 5 p.m., I was alone in my classroom when I heard voices in the hallway. It sounded like two of my students having the exact conversation they'd had during lunch about trading Pokemon cards. Word for word, exactly the same. I looked out into the hall, but it was empty. All the other teachers had gone home. The janitor was downstairs. But I could still hear Marcus and Jenny talking about Charizard cards, having the same conversation from 6 hours earlier. I followed the voices down the hall. They seemed to be coming from the boys' bathroom. But when I got there, the voices stopped. The bathroom was empty. The next week, I started paying closer attention to Tommy during recess. I would watch him from my classroom window while the kids played outside. Normal kids run around, play tag, use the monkey bars, laugh with friends. Tommy would just stand in one spot and watch. He never moved unless another child came too close. Then he would turn his head to follow them. But it was the way he turned his head that bothered me. Kids move their whole body when they look at something. Tommy would just turn his head, sometimes too far, like he could turn it further than a normal person should be able to. One day I went outside during recess to get a closer look. I walked over to where Tommy was standing by the fence. "How are you doing, Tommy?" I asked. "Would you like to play with the other kids?" He turned to look at me, and for just a second his face looked wrong, like his features shifted, rearranged themselves, then snapped back to normal. It happened so fast, I thought I imagined it. But then I noticed his shadow. The sun was directly overhead, so everyone's shadow should have been a short, dark spot directly below them. But Tommy's shadow was long and stretched out to the side, like the sun was setting instead of straight up. I looked up at the sun, then back down at his shadow. It didn't match where he was standing or where the light was coming from. "Tommy," I said, my voice shaking a little, "how long have you lived in Bethel?" "All my life," he said. "Where did you go to school before here?" "I've always gone to school here." "But this is your first day was October 15th. You're new." He stared at me for a long moment. "I've always been here, Mrs. Chen. You just didn't notice me before." That afternoon, I went to Mrs. Rodriguez's office. I told her about Tommy not eating, about the strange voices, about his shadow being wrong. I explained that I couldn't reach his emergency contact and that his enrollment paperwork was missing. "Sarah," she said, using my first name in that tone adults use when they think you're being silly, "you're a good teacher, but you have an overactive imagination. The boy is quiet and well-behaved." His test scores are excellent. He's not causing any problems. But Mrs. Rodriguez, something isn't right about him. The other kids are scared. The other kids need to learn to be more welcoming to new students. She cut me off. Tommy is a perfectly normal child, and I don't want to hear any more of this nonsense. I left her office feeling frustrated and confused. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe the stress of teaching and the long Alaska winter was getting to me. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Tommy's shadow pointing the wrong way. The next Monday, Jenny Martinez came to me before class started. She looked scared. "Mrs. Chen, can I tell you something about Tommy?" "Of course, Jenny. What is it?" "Friday after school, I went to the bathroom before my mom picked me up. I was washing my hands and looked in the mirror." She paused, like she wasn't sure I'd believe her. "I saw Tommy's face looking back at me instead of mine." "What do you mean?" "In the mirror, I had Tommy's face. His hair, his eyes, everything. But I could feel my own face with my hands. It was still me, but the mirror showed Tommy." I knelt down to her level. "Jenny, that sounds very scary. Are you sure that's what you saw?" She nodded. And when I turned around, Tommy was standing by the bathroom door, watching me. He said, "Thank you for letting me borrow it." Then he left. A chill ran down my spine. "Borrow what, Jenny?" "My face." That night, I went to Best Buy and bought a small security camera, the kind people use to watch their houses when they're away. I hid it on top of my classroom bookshelf, behind some decorations, where it could see most of the room. I set it to record during school hours. If something strange was happening with Tommy, I wanted proof. For 3 days, nothing unusual showed up on the recordings. Just normal classroom activities. Tommy sitting quietly, doing his work, not bothering anyone. But on Thursday, I checked the footage from after school. At 4:30 p.m., long after all the students had gone home, the camera caught something. Gee, impossible. Tommy was still in the classroom. On the video, I could see him standing up from his desk. But instead of walking normally, his body stretched upward, like he was made of rubber. His arms got longer, his legs extended, his neck stretched out. He looked like a person-shaped balloon that someone was inflating. Then he started moving around the room, but not walking. He flowed across the floor like liquid, going from desk to desk. At each desk, he would pause and change. His face would shift into the face of whichever student sat there. Marcus's face, then Jenny's, then Sarah Kim's, then back to his own. But the worst part was when he got to my desk. He stood there for 5 minutes, practicing. I watched him cycle through every student's voice, saying things they had said during class that day. Perfect imitations. Every word, every tone, every accent exactly right. At the end of the recording, Tommy looked directly at the camera. Even though I had hidden it well, he knew exactly where it was. He stared right into the lens and smiled. But it wasn't a child's smile. It was something else entirely. Then the recording cut out. The next morning I came to school early. Tommy was already at his desk, sitting perfectly still, hands folded, staring straight ahead. "Tommy," I said, "we need to talk." He turned to look at me. "About what, Mrs. Chen?" "About what you really are." For a moment his face went completely blank. No expression at all, like someone had turned off a TV. Then he smiled that same horrible smile from the camera. "I don't know what you mean," he said. But now his voice sounded different. Older, like an adult trying to sound like a child. "I saw the recording, Tommy. I know you're not human." He stood up from his desk. As he did, I noticed he was taller than he had been yesterday. Not much, just an inch or two, but enough that I could tell. "Mrs. Chen," he said. And now his voice was my voice coming out of his mouth. "You shouldn't have done that." "What are you?" I whispered. "I'm learning," he said in Jenny's voice. "I'm practicing," he continued in Marcus's voice. "I'm getting better," he finished in my voice again. "Learning what?" "How to be human." He tilted his head too far to the right. "It's harder than it looks. So many little details. The way you breathe, the way you blink, the way you move your hands when you talk." He stepped closer to me. "But I'm a very good student, Mrs. Chen. Soon I'll be perfect. Soon I won't need to practice anymore. The children are excellent teachers. They show me how to walk, how to laugh, how to play. And when I've learned enough from them," he smiled with too many teeth, "I won't need them anymore." I backed toward the door, but Tommy moved faster than any child should be able to. He was suddenly between me and the exit. "You can't leave, Mrs. Chen. You know too much now. And besides," his face started to change, features shifting like clay, "I haven't learned how to be a teacher yet." I grabbed my phone and called 911. 911, what's your emergency?" "This is Sarah Chen at Bethel Elementary. I need help immediately. There's something in my classroom that's not human." "Ma'am, can you repeat that?" Before I could answer, Tommy spoke into my phone using my exact voice. "Never mind, false alarm, everything is fine here." He had somehow projected his voice right into my phone. The dispatcher heard my voice saying everything was okay and hung up. "That's a useful skill," Tommy said in his normal voice. "I learned it from watching you talk to parents." I knew I had to get to the main office, had to get help somehow. But Tommy was blocking the door, and he was changing, getting taller, his arms getting longer, his fingers stretching out like spider legs. Then I heard something beautiful, the sound of children's voices in the hallway. The other kids were arriving for school. Tommy heard them too. Immediately, he snapped back to his normal 8-year-old appearance. "We'll continue this conversation later, Mrs. Chen," he said quietly, "when we're alone again." The first students started coming into the classroom, and Tommy sat down at his desk like nothing had happened. I made it through that day somehow. I taught my lessons, smiled at the children, pretended everything was normal. But I kept watching Tommy, and he kept watching me. At the end of the school day, I packed up my things and left immediately. I didn't stay late to grade papers or prep for the next day. I went straight home and wrote down everything that had happened. That night I called in sick. Then I called the next day and quit. Mrs. Rodriguez was confused and upset. "Sarah, you're one of our best teachers. What's wrong?" I couldn't tell her the truth. Who would believe that a shape-shifting creature had enrolled in elementary school to study how to be human? 2 weeks later, I heard that Tommy Uki had transferred to another school. No forwarding address, no explanation. He just disappeared from Bethel Elementary as suddenly as he had appeared. I moved to Anchorage and got a job at a private school there. I still teach 3rd grade, but I'm more careful now. I pay attention when new students enroll mid-semester. I watch for kids who don't eat lunch, who stare too much, whose shadows don't match their bodies. Because I learned something important that October. Not everything that looks like a child actually is one. And sometimes, the most dangerous predators are the ones that have learned to copy the faces of the innocent. I still have that security camera footage saved on my computer. Sometimes, late at night, I watch it again to remind myself that I'm not crazy, that what I saw was real. And sometimes, I wonder if Tommy ever finished learning how to be human. I wonder if he found another school, another teacher, another classroom full of children to study. I hope not, but I'm afraid that somewhere out there, he's still practicing. My name is Captain Bob Valdez, and I've been a commercial fisherman for 22 years. Started as a deckhand when I was 18, worked my way up through every position on a crab boat. I've got my master's license, my radio operator's permit, and I've survived 3 boat fires, 2 engine failures in 20-foot swells, and more storms than I can count. I run the Northern Star out of Dutch Harbor. She's a 120-foot crab boat, steel hull, built in 1987 but maintained like she rolled off the line yesterday. We fish king crab during the winter season, when the Bering Sea turns into something that wants to kill you every single day. I've pulled men out of freezing water, fought fires in 40-knot winds, and kept crews alive when everything went wrong at once. But what happened in December 2021, 60 miles northwest of Dutch Harbor, changed everything I thought I knew about what lives in these waters. And I'm telling you this story because the Coast Guard says I have to, for the official record, even though they're going to seal this file the minute I finish talking. The Northern Star left Dutch Harbor on December 12, 2021, with a full crew of 5. Besides myself, I had Tony Reeves as first mate. Been working with me for 8 years, steady as they come. Carlos Martinez was our newest deckhand, only his second season, but eager to learn. Danny Walsh and Mike Patterson rounded out the crew, both experienced guys who knew their way around a crab pot. We were heading to our usual fishing grounds about 60 miles out, where the continental shelf drops off into deep water. The weather forecast showed rough conditions, 15 to 20-foot seas with winds gusting to 40 knots. Nothing we hadn't handled before. The Northern Star can take a beating, and my crew knew their jobs. Our fishing plan was standard winter king crab. We had 200 pots to set in a grid, pattern over about 10 square miles of ocean floor. Each pot weighs around 750 pounds when loaded with bait, and we drop them in water ranging from 200 to 400 feet deep. The work is hard, dangerous, and cold, but king crab was going for $8 a pound that season. The boat's electronics were all functioning normally when we left port. Our GPS plotters showed our position, the fish finder was painting the bottom clearly, and the radar swept a clean picture of the surface around us. Radio communications with Dutch Harbor were clear, and our emergency beacon was tested and ready. The first 3 days went exactly as planned. We set our pots in rough but manageable seas, marked each location on our GPS, and started the waiting period before our first pull. The crew worked well together, everyone stayed warm and dry between deck periods, and our engine ran smooth and steady. December 15th started like any other day. We were running a transit to check some pots we'd set on the northern edge of our grid. The weather had calmed down to 10-foot seas with light winds, almost pleasant by Bering Sea standards. I was in the wheelhouse monitoring our course when Tony called up from the galley. "Cap, you better take a look at the fish finder. Something's not right down there." I glanced at the sonar display and saw what he meant. Instead of the usual bottom reading showing scattered fish and crab, there was a massive return about 50 feet off the seafloor. The signature was solid, dense, and moving slowly parallel to our course. "Probably a whale," I called back. "Gray whale maybe, or a right whale." But as I watched the display, the object's movement pattern didn't match any whale I'd ever seen. Whales surface to breathe. They dive and change direction. They behave like air-breathing mammals. This thing just glided along at the same depth, maintaining the same distance from us. I called Tony up to the wheelhouse. He studied the sonar for several minutes while I maintained our course. "Cap, that thing's got to be 200 feet long. What kind of whale grows? That big?" "Blue whale can hit 100 feet, I said, "but you're right, this looks bigger." The object followed us for 3 hours. Every time I changed course, it adjusted to match. When I slowed down, it slowed down. When I sped up, it kept pace. The sonar showed it undulating through the water with a fluid, snake-like motion. "Maybe it's a submarine," Danny suggested when he came up for coffee. "Russian sub, maybe, checking out our fishing operations." But submarines don't move like that. They're rigid, mechanical. This thing flexed and curved as it swam, like it was alive. By noon, the whole crew was taking turns at the sonar display. We joked about sea monsters and giant squids, but there was an edge to the laughter. In 22 years of fishing, I'd never seen anything track a boat like that. "Whatever it is," I told the crew, "we've got work to do. Let's pull the southern string and see what we caught." We were running southwest toward our first pot when Tony shouted from the starboard rail, "Jesus Christ, Captain, get out here now." I stepped out of the wheelhouse and followed Tony's pointing finger. About 100 yards off our starboard side, the water was bulging upward like something massive was rising from below. The surface tension held for a moment, then broke. A tentacle thicker than a telephone pole erupted from the sea. It rose 20 feet into the air, covered in suckers the size of dinner plates. The skin was dark gray, almost black, with a texture like wet leather. The tentacle swayed in the air for a moment, then began reaching toward our boat. "All hands, get away from the rail," I shouted. The crew scattered from the deck as more tentacles broke the surface. I counted at least 6, each one massive and moving with deliberate intelligence. They explored the air around our boat like fingers feeling for something in the dark. Carlos, our youngest crewmate, Ember, had frozen at the stern rail. He was staring at the tentacles with his mouth open, not moving, not responding to our shouts. One of the tentacles curved through the air and wrapped around his waist. Carlos screamed as the appendage lifted him 20 feet off the deck. The suckers along the tentacle were burning through his rain gear like acid. I could see smoke rising from where they touched his clothes. "Get the boat hook!" I yelled to Tony. Tony grabbed the 12-foot aluminum pole we used for handling lines and ran toward the stern. Carlos was thrashing in the tentacle's grip, screaming as the suckers ate through his gear and into his skin. Tony swung the boat hook like a baseball bat and slammed it into the tentacle just below where it held Carlos. The impact made a wet, meaty sound. The tentacle flinched and loosened its grip enough for Carlos to fall back onto the deck. He hit the fiberglass hard, his rain gear smoking and torn. Where the suckers had touched him, his skin was burned in perfect circles, already blistering and weeping. The tentacles withdrew from around our boat, sliding back into the dark water. But then something else began to surface. A head the size of a small car broke through the waves 50 yards away. It was triangular, like a massive squid, but wrong in ways that made my brain hurt to look at. The beak was lined with rows of teeth like a shark's mouth, but it was the eyes that froze me in place. They were the size of car tires, black as deep water, and they looked directly at me with unmistakable intelligence. The creature studied our boat for maybe 30 seconds. I could feel its attention like a physical weight. Then it slipped back beneath the surface and vanished, leaving only disturbed water and the smell of deep ocean. I grabbed the radio and switched to the Coast Guard emergency frequency. Coast Guard Dutch Harbor, this is the fishing vessel Northern Star. We have a medical emergency and need immediate evacuation. Over. The response came back clear and professional. Northern Star, this is Coast Guard. Dutch Harbor, state the nature of your medical emergency. Over. I looked at Carlos, who was conscious but going into shock from his burns. How do you explain acid burns from a sea monster? Coast Guard, we have a crew member with severe chemical burns. Unknown marine life encounter. We need helicopter evacuation immediately. Over. Northern Star, confirm you said unknown marine life? Over. That's affirmative, Coast Guard. Request immediate medical evacuation. Crew member has third-degree burns. Cause unknown. Over. The Coast Guard helicopter reached us in 45 minutes. The rescue swimmer had to be lowered to our deck because the seas were too rough for a water landing. Carlos was unconscious by then, but stable. What the hell did this to him? The rescue swimmer asked as we loaded Carlos into the rescue basket. We're not sure, I said. Some kind of marine animal we've never seen before. The helicopter crew flew Carlos to Anchorage General Hospital. We followed the Coast Guard cutter back to Dutch Harbor, where federal agents were waiting at the dock. Dr. Sarah Chen, a marine biologist from the University of Alaska, examined Carlos's wounds 3 days later. She took tissue samples from his burns and photographed the circular scar pattern left by the suckers. These burn marks don't match any known marine creature, she told me during her interview. The pattern is consistent with some kind of acid secretion, but the protein structure in the tissue samples doesn't exist in any species we've cataloged. So what are you saying? I asked. I'm saying that whatever did this to your crew member, it's not in any textbook. The Coast Guard classified our incident as an unidentified marine life encounter. My official report was filed, Carlos's medical records were sealed, and we were all asked to sign non-disclosure agreements. Carlos recovered, but the CI, cellular scars on his torso and arms, never fully healed. He quit fishing and moved back to California. Won't talk about what happened, not even to me. I still run the Northern Star out of Dutch Harbor, but I don't fish those waters anymore, 60 miles northwest of port. The crew thinks it's because the crab moved to different grounds. I let them think that. Sometimes, late at night when we're running back to port, I check the sonar. Most of the time it shows normal bottom structure, scattered fish, the usual returns you'd expect. But sometimes, maybe once every few months, I see that signature again. A massive object moving through the deep water, 200 feet long, undulating like it's alive. When that happens, I change course immediately. I don't care if we leave crab pots behind. I don't care if the crew thinks I'm losing my nerve, because I know what's down there in the deep water of the Bering Sea. And I know it's still watching us, waiting in the dark between the continental shelf and the abyss. The ocean is bigger than most people realize. We've mapped less than 20% of the seafloor. We don't know what lives in the deepest trenches, what swims in the midnight zone where sunlight never reaches. But after December 15th, 2021, I know we're not alone out there. And whatever's sharing these waters with us, it's been here a lot longer than we have. That's my statement for the record. You can file it wherever you want, classify it however you need to. But that's what happened to the Northern Star and her crew, 60 miles northwest of Dutch Harbor, Alaska. And that's why Carlos Martinez has scars that no marine biologist can explain, and why I don't fish the deep water anymore. Some things are better left alone. My name is Marcus Thompson, and I've been working retail for 4 years now. Started when I was 18 at a grocery store back in Seattle, worked my way up to assistant manager before I decided I needed a change. When the job posting came up for a night shift clerk at Arctic Express Convenience in Nome, Alaska, the pay was too good to pass up. Double what I was making down south, plus housing allowance. Sure, it meant working alone from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. in one of the most remote places in America, but I figured how hard could it be? I'd handled drunk customers, shoplifters, and even a robbery attempt back in Seattle. I thought I'd seen everything retail had to throw at me. Arctic Express serves the gold miners, long-haul truckers, and locals who need supplies at all hours. During gold rush season, which runs from May through September, we'd get miners coming in at 2 a.m. for energy drinks and cigarettes before heading back to their claims. Truckers would stop for coffee and road snacks on their way to deliver supplies to remote villages. It was steady work, and after the chaos of city retail, I liked the predictable quiet. But what happened in March 2023 changed everything I thought I knew about working alone at night. It started with just one customer who seemed a little off. By the end, I was questioning everything I thought I understood about what's possible in this world. The Arctic Express sits on the edge of Nome, right where the town meets the wilderness. It's a simple rectangular building with big windows across the front, fluorescent lights inside, and a parking lot that's more gravel than pavement. Behind the store, there's nothing but spruce trees stretching into the darkness for hundreds of miles. The closest neighbor is a gas station about half a mile down the road, and they close at midnight. My shift started like any other night in early March. Temperature was sitting around minus 15, which is pretty normal for that time of year. I'd unlock the front door, flip on all the lights, start the coffee machine, and check that the security cameras were recording properly. We had 6 cameras total, 2 covering the parking lot, 1 on each aisle inside, 1 behind the counter, and 1 covering the back entrance. The routine was simple: stock the coolers, clean the hot food area, do inventory counts on cigarettes and alcohol, and help whatever customers wandered in. Most nights I'd see maybe 10 people total, a few miners grabbing supplies, a trucker or 2, maybe some locals picking up beer or snacks. By 3 a.m., things usually got dead quiet until the early morning crowd started showing up around 5:30. That first night I noticed him, March 8th, I was restocking the beef jerky display when I heard the door chime at exactly 3:17 a.m. I looked up to see a tall, thin man walking through the entrance. He had to be at least 6.5 feet tall, maybe taller, wearing an oversized dark coat that went down to his knees. The coat looked old, like something from the 1980s, made of some kind of heavy material that didn't move right when he walked. What struck me first was how quiet he was. Most people coming in from that cold make noise, stomping their feet, blowing on their hands, making some comment about the weather. This guy just glided in like the cold didn't bother him at all. He went straight to the meat section, picked up 2 packages of raw ground beef, then walked over to the battery display and grabbed a 4-pack of D-cell batteries. Same brands every time, the cheap store brand ground beef and basic alkaline batteries. When he came to the counter, he set the items down without saying a word. I tried the usual small talk. "Cold night, huh?" Or, "Find everything okay?" But he just stared at me, not in a rude way, exactly, but like he was studying me. His eyes were pale blue, almost gray, and there was something off about the way they caught the fluorescent light. They seemed to reflect it back like an animal's eyes would in headlights. He paid with exact change, counting out bills and coins without breaking eye contact. The coins were old and tarnished, some of them so worn I could barely make out the dates. A few looked like they might be from the 1960s or earlier. When I handed him his receipt, his fingers were ice cold, even through the thin latex gloves I wore for handling money. The whole interaction took maybe 2 minutes, and then he was gone, walking back out into the night. I watched through the window as he crossed the parking lot, but instead of going to a car or truck, he just kept walking toward the tree line behind the store. I figured maybe he'd parked on the road or was staying at one of the mining camps within walking distance. The next night, same thing. 3:17. Exactly. Same items, same routine. I started paying more attention to details. His coat never seemed to have snow on it, even though it had been snowing lightly most of the day. His boots didn't make the squeaking sound that cold rubber usually makes on the linoleum floor, and his eyes definitely didn't adjust to the bright store lights the way normal eyes should. By the end of the first week, I was genuinely curious about this guy. In 4 years of retail, I'd never had a customer with such a rigid routine. Always the same time, same items, same amount of money, and he never spoke a single word. I tried engaging him different ways, asking about the weather, the gold mining, anything to get a response. He would just stare at me with those strange pale eyes, take his items, and leave. That's when I decided to check the security footage. I waited until my break the second week and pulled up the recordings on the office computer. The cameras had clear views of the parking lot and the area around the store, so I figured I'd finally get a look at what kind of vehicle he was driving. Maybe that would give me some clue about who he was or where he was coming from. What I saw on the footage made no sense. At 3:16 a.m., the parking lot was empty. At 3:17, the man was walking toward the front door, but there was no car, no truck, nothing in the lot. I rewound and watched it again. 1 second, the lot was empty. The next second, he was just there, walking from the direction of the trees behind the store. But the trees were a good 50 yards from the building, across rough ground covered in snow. I switched to the rear camera to see if maybe he'd parked back there, but the footage just showed empty wilderness. Then I watched him leave. He walked out the front door, crossed the parking lot, and headed straight into the tree line. No hesitation, no trail, just walked into the dense spruce forest like he knew exactly where he was going. That was weird enough, but when I really studied the footage, I noticed something else. The way he moved wasn't quite right. His arms seemed too long for his body, hanging down past where they should. And his walk was strange. Not limping exactly, but like he was being very careful about how he placed each foot, like someone learning to walk upright. I started watching for him more carefully after that. The third week, I positioned myself with a clear view of the entire store when 3:17 came around. He bought his usual items, but this time I followed him to the window and watched as he left. He walked across the parking lot in a straight line toward the trees, but his stride length seemed to increase with each step. By the time he reached the tree line, he was covering ground faster than any normal person should be able to walk. On March 23rd, I made a decision that I still regret. I was going to follow him. I waited until he left the store, then grabbed my coat and the big flashlight we kept behind the counter. The temperature was around, and -20, and the snow was crunchy under my boots. I could see his footprints clearly in the beam of my flashlight, and I started following them toward the woods. The first thing I noticed was that the prints started out normal, about size 12 boots, human-shaped. But as I followed them away from the store, they began to change. The toe area got longer and wider, and I could see what looked like claw marks extending beyond where the boot sole should end. The stride length increased too, going from normal human steps to something more like 6-foot strides. I followed the trail for about 20 minutes, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness between the trees. The forest was completely silent except for the crunch of snow under my feet and my own breathing. No wind, no animal sounds, nothing. The trail led deeper into the wilderness, following what might have been an old mining road or game trail. Then I saw a light ahead. It was coming from a small building, maybe 2 miles from the store, an old mining shack, probably abandoned for decades. The walls were rough wood and the roof was partially collapsed on one side, but there was definitely light coming from inside. I crept closer, staying in the tree line until I could see through one of the windows. What I saw inside made my blood freeze. The floor was covered with items from our store. Not just a few packages, but dozens of them. Raw ground beef, batteries, energy drinks, beef jerky, cigarettes, all arranged in careful patterns across the floor. The meat packages had been opened, and some of the contents were gone, but what remained looked like it had been partially consumed raw. The batteries were connected with copper wire to some kind of device I'd never seen before. The device looked homemade, like someone had taken apart several electronic items and rebuilt them into something else. It had a screen that flickered with green light, and it was making a low humming sound that I could feel in my chest as much as hear. Wires ran from the battery packs to various components, and the whole thing pulsed with that green glow every few seconds. But what really scared me was the man himself. He was crouched in the corner of the shack, still wearing that oversized coat, but now I could see that the coat was hiding something. His proportions were wrong, arms too long, legs bent at angles that didn't look human, and he was eating the raw meat with his hands, tearing chunks off and swallowing them without chewing. When he moved, it was with that same careful, deliberate motion I'd noticed in the store, but now I could see why. He was moving like something that had learned to imitate human movement, but wasn't quite getting it right. Like a puppet being controlled by someone who'd never actually seen a person walk. I started backing away slowly, trying not to make any noise, but my boot hit a fallen branch and it cracked like a gunshot in the silent forest. The man's head snapped up, and those pale eyes locked onto the window where I was hiding. For a moment we stared at each other through the glass, and I saw something in those eyes that wasn't human intelligence. It was older, hungrier, and completely alien. I ran. I crashed through the forest as fast as I could, following my own footprints back toward the store. Behind me, I could hear something moving through the trees, but it wasn't running. It was moving with purpose, like it knew exactly where I was going and wasn't worried about catching up. When I finally burst out of the tree line behind the store, I was gasping and shaking from more than just the cold. I fumbled with my keys to get back inside, locked the door, and called my supervisor. I told him I was sick and needed to leave early. I'd never left a shift before completion, but I couldn't stay there another minute. The next morning, I went to the store manager and put in my 2 weeks' notice. I made up some story about a family emergency back in Seattle. I couldn't tell him the truth. Who would believe it? But here's the thing that still bothers me most. That last night, after I got back to the store, I checked the security footage from the rear camera. The timestamp showed me running out of the forest at 4:23 a.m., but according to the front cameras, the strange customer had left the store at 3:19 a.m., same as always. I'd been in those woods for over an hour, but somehow he'd gotten back to the shack, done whatever he was doing with those store items, and I'd still found him there. Either the cameras were wrong or time doesn't work the same way in that part of the forest. I finished my last shift 2 weeks later and drove straight to Anchorage, then caught the first flight back to Seattle. I never told anyone what I saw in that shack, and I never tried to find out what that device was or what he was doing with all those store items. The manager who replaced me lasted 3 months before he quit too. The night shift position at Arctic Express has been through 6 different people since I left. According to the local newspaper, they're having trouble keeping anyone in that job for more than a few weeks. I'm back in Seattle now, working at a regular grocery store again. Normal hours, normal customers, normal problems. But sometimes, when I'm working late and it gets quiet, I remember that low humming sound from the device in the shack. And I wonder if there are others like him out there, shopping at convenience stores in remote places, buying the same strange combinations of items night after night. If you're working alone at night in a place like Nome, and you start seeing the same customer at the exact same time every night, buying things that don't make sense together, my advice is simple: don't follow them home. Some questions aren't worth getting answered. And if you ever hear that low-frequency humming sound coming from the wilderness behind your store, call in sick and leave immediately. Trust me on this one. Whatever they're building out there in the darkness, you don't want to know what it's for.